What time is it? Clobbering time!
I'm a fighter. I'm a competitor. We're gonna have some fun tonight.
Never again will I take a backseat to anybody in this business. Now, it's Magna's time.
We the people!
I'm a Carter, and the world needs us.
I'm the beast and the best. Paul, say something stupid. I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
Tonight I am personally going to make sure what happens is best for business.
SAWFT soft.
Ladies and gentlemen, wrestling to the max.
And here's your hosts, Gary Vaughn, Sean Garmer, and Paul Lazar.
Alrighty, and welcome to Wrestling to the Max Extra number 4. And this one's kind of sad, because we have to talk about the passing, the legacy, and everything of Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, the man we saw for 3 straight days over WrestleMania weekend. It's just kind of sad, guys.
Yeah, it sure is. And, we love doing these extras. It's always a good time because, honestly, we get free will. It's a time for us to kind of just talk and have a conversation and not be tied down to TV shows or anything considered like big news in wrestling. We can just kind of have fun here, kind of elaborate on some things. And this is not really a fun one. It will be an interesting one, I will say, but it's not really a fun one for the fact that we lost a big part of wrestling history. A guy that was instrumental in the early 90s, late 80s, and really gaining momentum in the culture of wrestling. I mean, we saw a lot of kids be, huge fans of Hulk Hogan, but what happened? Ultimate Warrior came, and they became and pretty close to as big as fans for Ultimate Warrior. I've heard plenty of people say you're either in the Hogan camp or you're in the Warrior camp. And so it's so interesting to see, what a big, legacy and a mark and stamp that he left on people's lives and, of course, the industry we call wrestling. And so we want to touch on all those things. But before we do that, I just want to, stop and get everybody's reaction. A lot of you guys out there listening, you had your reactions. You had your moment. You said, wow, this is really happening. We want to fill you in on kind of what we had, thought and what happened with us. And I'll just go ahead and go first just because mine's kind of silly. I had no idea about it. Late Tuesday night, I'm just kind of hanging out. We had a big weekend of wrestling talk. We did several podcasts. I was on another podcast, so I was just wrestled out almost. We've just been talking wrestling all weekend. And, I get on my phone every once in a while and kind of look at wrestling news just to kind of see what's going on. And I saw breaking news, Ultimate Warrior's death, and I'm thinking, what? And I look into it, and it says he collapsed and passed away. And, of course, there's no information on how or, really why he passed away from collapsing, so that really gets your mind jogging. And so that whole time I was kind of shocked, and I texted Sean and said, Sean, is this real or are they just playing us? Is this a prank, a hoax, or what's going on here? And Sean, said, hey, no, this is actually real from what I'm seeing. And so that was my reaction. It was just kind of flooring, and I just kind of felt sad. But what did you guys think? What was your reaction? When did you find out?
I found out, I think, about an hour after the news broke. I was doing something around the house, I don't remember what, and I climbed on the internet. This was the first thing I saw when I went to Facebook was, our Facebook group was live with, holy crap, Ultimate Warrior's dead, and I'm still, just in a state of surrealism, we saw the guy on Monday, and that's 5 days ago on our television screen, and he was fine, and he's suddenly got. I mean, it really, I guess, is more of a statement about life that you're literally here 1 minute and gone the next, but still, it's still incredibly surreal to me.
Yeah, I was on the Facebook group. I was part of the people that really just. I remember was it Jason Humphrey posted the RIP Warrior, and then Chaz came in and posted the report from Triple H and WWE.com and everything, and I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, seriously, what the hell just happened? He was just here. We just saw the guy. I mean, it's amazing. Like, he was here 3 straight days. We saw him cut a promo on Raw. We're gonna play that promo for you in a little bit. It's just, we nobody really knew, right? That he had apparently it seems like he had some kind of issue that he wasn't telling anyone. According to certain people, he didn't look good at all. They just kind of made him look good on TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sad because he told us that whole thing on the Hall of Fame speech. I'm going to be an ambassador for WWE now. I signed a contract, and it's kind of sad that he never got to even work that job one day.
Yeah.
And really change his life around or whatever,
It is such a shame, especially when it was such a long separation between Ultimate Warrior and the WWE. I mean, it was just such a big gap of time. And for this to be the time for him to come back, it was almost a dream come true for both sides. I mean, they're going to get one of their big legends back. He's going to be an ambassador for him. And they're going to be able to use him for all these different projects I'm sure they were wanting to do, especially when the network, is right there for them to exploit him. That was going to be a big deal. I know it. I mean, they may have even had a special few things that were going to, put him in show-wise, or maybe even some documentaries coming up in the future. And it's just a shame that he didn't get to experience that. He didn't get to live it. I'm so thrilled to death that the man made it to the Hall of Fame. He made it to the Raw after. We didn't have to, put him in, sadly, like Paul Bearer. It's just such a good thing that he made it. I'm so happy that, Vince and him got that hatchet buried. That was one of the first big reactions that I had as well, thinking about this whole thing. What if they would have delayed it? What if they wouldn't have come to agreement this year? What if they said, okay, Ultimate Warrior, at WrestleMania 31, you're in. Don't worry, we'll get this settled. We're just going to wait another year. Think about that. Think of how depressing that would have been for all of us. Not getting a chance to get a speech from him, not getting any really big inside information from him, just to kind of hear his side of the story. I'm so glad it was done, and it was done the right way. I mean, to me personally, I don't know how you guys feel, but you couldn't write a script from Hollywood like this happened. I mean, this is almost like it came straight out of Hollywood to me.
I mean, yeah, it feels almost like it. It's like with most sports stories. Sometimes you can't write stuff like this, and I mean, as much as I'm sure people wish they could, I mean, this would probably make a really interesting movie.
I agree.
Oh yeah, me and Gary kind of joked about it a little bit, that it's kind of weird, just how everything happens, and he was at WrestleMania 30 and all that, and then you have this, and it's like Gary goes, Warrior 2016, the movie, and I'm like, well, it could happen.
Yeah,
don't put it past anyone.
I'm sure it will. I mean, I don't think Hollywood's not going to exploit this. They're already exploiting other stories. Trust me, they'll find a way to get this one in there.
That Bruno movie's still around there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, and they're already working on that one, so surely they're working on this one now. But as fun as that would be to see, and as entertaining as I'm sure that movie will be, it'll still be a shame, and for us just thinking about it, because it's kind of depressing. It really is, to think about all the cool things we missed out on because Ultimate Warrior's life was cut short at the early age of 54. It's just kind of upsetting to think about that. I like, and we'll play some clips for you guys, don't worry, but I like what I heard from Warrior recently what when he was basically talking about the fact that he constantly thought about how his legend would be, his legacy, and here we are now. Now, sooner than we wanted it to be, we're thinking about his legacy. We're not thinking about he's still around. We're now thinking about his legacy. Such a short 5 days, before we weren't really thinking about that. We were just thinking about how his career was and what he'll do in the future. But anyway, well, here's something else we really got to talk about. I mean, this is the elephant in the room. We all saw Monday Night Raw. We touched on it a little bit. We had such a big episode. Lots of different people on the WrestleMania 30 recap show we had on Monday. We really didn't get to touch on too much about that little, promo that Warrior did. And sadly, that was his last promo he ever did.
We didn't even think about what he said or anything. We just kind of talked about he did the promo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how cool it was that he did one. And then, we're going to play this clip for you. If you listen to the words, it just sounds like he's prophesizing his own death. It's just really sad. And we didn't even think about it like that, right? When we're sitting here just talking about it.
Yeah, Paul. I mean, it's kind of funny. We didn't talk about it at all. But when you first, let's rewind back in time. Let's pretend it's Monday right now. When you originally heard that promo that Warrior cut, what was your first reaction when you heard him kind of have this conversation about legacy and, of course, the future stars? Did you just kind of think it was some kind of normal thing, or did you think it was kind of odd?
I put this up in the Facebook group too. It was the most coherent thing I think I've ever heard him say. Which probably says a lot, I guess, now in retrospect.
So true. And it was, to me, I'll just state my point of view, looking at it and kind of listening to him talk, I just thought how mature he's become, how more the industry's more important than who he was. And I like that. It was so cool because we know, some of the history on Warrior and who he we thought he was, let's just say it that way. And to see what he did and how mature he handled himself. But, we should go ahead and just play the clip. Let's let everybody hear. If you don't remember or you didn't get a chance to watch Raw, this is a chance to kind of hear that promo. It's kind of eerie.
Speak to me, Warrior! As I thought about what I was going to say this evening, it's been hard for me to find the words.
Oh, this is going to be great. There you go. There's the Warrior.
Well then, you shut up, Warrior, and let me do the talking. No WWE talent becomes a legend on their own. Every man's heart one day beats its final beat. His lungs breathe their final breath. And if what that man did in his life makes the blood pulse through the body of others, it makes them bleed deeper in something than larger than life, then his essence, his spirit will be immortalized by the storytellers, by the loyalty, by the memory of those who honor him and make the running the man did live forever. You are the legend makers of Ultimate Warrior. In the back, I see many potential legends, some of them with warrior spirits, and you will do the same for them. You will decide if they lived with a passion and intensity, so much so that you will tell your stories and you will make them legends as well. I am Ultimate Warrior. You are the Ultimate Warrior fans. And the spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever.
The Ultimate Warrior, the newest member of the Hall of Fame.
That's so eerie. Wow.
So scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so amazing when you listen to something back like that where, you know, it's almost a prediction. It's almost like, I know this is going to happen, but you don't. And I mean, I go back to what Sean said earlier. It's almost like he was sick. He knew he was sick. No one else knew. And he just basically put his last will and testament right there in front of you just so he could have his last word. But, I mean, I just want your guys' reactions on that. How did you feel about this promo now that you know he passed away and you kind of revisiting it? What do you think about it?
I think it says a lot about what he thought about the business, about how he thought about himself in relation to the fans. I mean, not only does he eerily predict that, you know, his end is soon or nigh or however you want to put it, but I think it says a lot about how he looked at the business more than anything.
It's something. It's funny because he always seems to, now at least, be able to. He separates himself from his character, which is something you don't see all the time. A lot of the times when they say me or what I did. He always says what Ultimate Warrior did. You know, he puts himself in like a different place than the character he played, and he even does it there, right? He talks like himself, then he puts the mask on, and he's Ultimate Warrior, you know. And it's weird, like just not just the promo itself, just the Hall of Fame speech, everything, just what it seemed like he has matured so much. He changed from the way he was. I think he did say he and Vince had to negotiate for 2 years in order to get him into the Hall of Fame because he was still stinging from the DVD, the other DVD and everything. To me, it just kind of tells you everything about he really wants to cement his legend. He wants, you know, the Ultimate Warrior to be remembered for something, and it's part of me just can't separate the whole how eerie that is, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Had nothing happened to him, I don't think we would have even been thinking about that at all, right? We would have just been like, oh, okay, he said something kind of prophetic. He said something, you know, that you would kind of say if you're trying to cement legends and whatever. But this is weird because he passed the next day.
Yeah. Right. And when you're saying that, it's kind of funny to me too, looking back at this promo, because what I first took from it, and I think what I was thinking Monday was, this is really on the theme of the whole weekend. The whole theme of the weekend was what? The future. Future wrestlers, future stars, guys that are taking over the business from older stars. And as you listen to the end of the promo, when he's talking about the young kids in the back and who's going to be the next guy, who are the fans going to choose to have a big legacy with? Who are they going to write the stories about? And that's what's so cool about this, is the fact that I thought it was about that, and now to see that it may not have been about that as much as it was about, you know, him realizing he's passing the torch in a sense, because he's not going to be here forever, and he wasn't. And it's, you know, once again, it's such a sad thing. I mean, he had 2 young children. I believe they were like 8 and 11. If you watch the Hall of Fame, you did get a chance to see them, and his wife, of course. So it's such a sad deal to you know, especially when anybody leaves young kids behind. I mean, that's got to be a very heart-throbbing situation for this family. But at least, they can look back now and say that they're proud of their dad and everything he accomplished, and he got to enjoy that, and they got to enjoy it with him at the Hall of Fame. Like I said, this could have been a terrible situation where they said, well, my dad was in the Hall of Fame, but he wasn't there with us when we were celebrating his Hall of Fame. They were there. He was there. It was great. What a great weekend. Yeah,
that was the thing that I kind of felt bad for Paul Bear's kids, right? One of them had to do the Paul Bear, oh yes, thing at the end, and it should have been Paul Bear doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who's around still of Macho Man's family, but that whenever that day comes, that's going to be really sad too. So at least he got to have his moment, right? He got to be there and be with the family, and it's funny. One of his kids is named Indiana, and that's named after where he used to live when he was a kid. So I thought that was kind of funny in a way.
Yeah.
The other one's named Madigan, which I don't know what that's from, but I was like, oh, name your kid after one of the states you used to live in. So,
sorry, I couldn't hear that name and not think Indiana Jones. Sorry. Your name's what? Oh, I'll just call you Indy. You can call me Short Round. But I know. Bad joke. But, it's kind of interesting.
Especially because you're white.
Paul, it's always got to be about race with you. Joking. But in all seriousness, there's something else about this whole story it's very interesting. It is the fact that all the backstage stuff that we're now hearing about, and I'm sure you guys have heard some of this and read up on it. And our fans, the people that listen to this show, are pretty up on things, so I'm sure they've already checked these things out. But
I just want to say one thing, though. Me and Gary and a lot of the Facebook group were speculating, when this happened. And, some of the guys, I think Justin even posted a picture of, he has a Ultimate Warrior brawling buddy from when he's a kid. I don't want to really tell anything about it. He told me something about his life that happened, and it's like one of his few mementos that he has from being a kid. And I was like, wow, just how apropos. Out of all the things you have, it's an Ultimate Warrior brawling buddy just in your closet there. That we were all speculating, kind of like, we know Warrior's kind of crazy. Did he kill himself? Did he do something? Was it any kind of drinking or drugs or whatever? In a way, I am kind of glad, even if it has to do kind of like Eddie, where he maybe decided too late to try to be clean, and it didn't work out for him. But I'm just glad to know that it didn't have anything to do with something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Same here.
We have somebody calling in, so.
Okay.
You are live with Wrestling to the Max. Who is this?
Hey guys, it's Josh. How y'all doing?
Hey, pretty good, man.
Pretty good.
Hey, we're talking about the Ultimate Warrior, everything, what happened on Raw, and just kind of really getting into, his passing and what we think about it. John, what were your first reaction when you heard about the Ultimate Warrior's death?
I get complete and utter shock, like everybody else. I remember when I first got into wrestling, Ultimate Warrior is the guy that really got me into it. I remember in elementary school, and no disrespect to Hulk Hogan at all, but everybody was Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan. So I turned on this thing called, quote unquote, fake wrestling. I was a big baseball fan, like real sports fan. So I turned on wrestling, it's all Hulk Hogan. He looked like he was 50 back then. So I just couldn't really get into it, And again, no disrespect to Hogan. I completely marked out when I finally got to see him live a couple of weeks ago. But it wasn't until the Ultimate Warrior came around WrestleMania 6 time, and my friends in school started talking about this new guy, Ultimate Warrior. And I was like, whatever, I'll check it out, just so I can understand what my friends are talking about. And I saw him, and I was like, oh my God, this is great. He's like a real life comic book character. I love it. Ever since then, I was hooked.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this about my experience. I like what you're saying because it reminds me of my experience. Now, I was not as big of a wrestling fan as at my younger age. I became more of a fan, during the WCW boom time, I would say. So my first experience with the Ultimate Warrior was way past WWF. It was actually when he came into WCW, facing against Hulk Hogan. He was actually part of the NWO at the time. And that was something that I thought was really cool. I mean, my first experience with the Ultimate Warrior was like, wow, this guy's energetic, he's crazy, and Hulk Hogan's actually afraid of this guy when the NWO is running rampant on everybody else. There's one guy that can actually keep him down. So I thought a lot of the Ultimate Warrior, and not knowing very much of him until I got older and learned more about his, history and his, time in WWF at the time. So yeah, I mean, I can kind of see where you're coming from. I mean, he was I don't want to say the anti-Hulk Hogan, but he was another big star that people that weren't really Hogan fans can latch on to, and that's really cool. You have those people who loved Austin more than they like The Rock, and you have others who like The Rock more than they don't Austin. That's always a good time in wrestling when you have two big stars you can look at and choose from. That's my opinion about it, but anything else you wanted to add about that, Josh?
Oh, actually, I love that comparison you made to Austin the Rock, because in the early 90s, that's kind of what it was. Like, when it was, the attitude era was Austin the Rock. Before that, it was Hogan and Warrior. You had Hogan guys, you had Warrior guys. And I was always a Warrior guy. I mean, yes, okay, he had his problems, whatever, but, Hogan did too. Austin did too. Rock did too. Everybody did, but when it's all said and done, I was always an Ultimate Warrior guy. I especially loved seeing him come back for the Hall of Fame and WrestleMania and Raw. So it was 3 nights in a row that we actually got to see this guy. And especially, I will say my wife didn't get to see the Ultimate Warrior, but she's heard me talk about him. And she was super excited to see him come back and squash all of those beefs, even though she and not even I really knew how deep those beefs go. The only thing that we know is what we read online. Like, Hogan hated him, Vince hated him, Jake hated him, DiBiase hated him, but luckily he had that chance that one weekend to completely squash everything, and I think that's awesome. It was a perfect way to go out. I'm not saying that I like that he died immediately after. That totally sucks, but at least he had that chance to kind of level everything out.
Mm-hmm. Paul, Sean, you guys have anything to add to that?
Warrior, I didn't get to catch Warrior the first time around when he was at his prime. I was 3, so by the time I was into wrestling, Bret Hart was the guy who won me in. But you had Warrior come around for part 2 in '96, and it's somebody. When you're a kid, he's just somebody your attention gravitates to because he's this hyper, out of his mind, crazy person that you just can't help but love because he's so crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Warrior was one of these guys. I remember I watched wrestling on and off as a kid. I really didn't get totally into it until Attitude Era, but I remember things here and there. I remember Ultimate Warrior as a kid, hearing that music, and when you talk about somebody having presence, that's one of the first people that come to my mind. I think even before Hogan, I think Warrior, just, you hear the music, you see him running, you see the face paint, you see the man, you go, oh my God, I got to pay attention to what's happening right here. It doesn't matter if his match sucked. It doesn't matter if his match lasted about 2 minutes. You know, it doesn't matter if you know, half the time he couldn't really get around the ring and know what he's doing and whatever, or he had to have people help him. You know, it just, when you're a kid like that, what you think about is the pizzazz, the everything that went with Warrior, what made him so great. You know, you weren't thinking about, oh, these matches aren't anything back then. You're just thinking about how cool he is. You weren't thinking about that his promos make no sense. You're thinking about how cool he is, you know, and it's just, as is said in the DVDs, as is said in everything, it's like he was different than Hogan. It was like, not necessarily an anti-Hogan, but like a different kind of, almost like a superhero. Mm-hmm. Like, he came out of a comic book, and you could kind of see that, instead of like Hogan, where, oh, here's this guy that makes you say your prayers and take your vitamins and all this stuff. And Warrior didn't instruct you. He just wanted you to be there with him, like, you know. And it was just this thing. And, you know, watching it now, it doesn't matter that I know maybe the match I'm going to watch isn't that great. Just all the stuff that comes before that is kind of, I feel like I'm just glued to the TV because he's there.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that also. And another story that I want to state, and I hope I don't go too long with this. If you guys got to get off, let me know.
Go ahead, man.
No, go for it.
Well, you know, when I was a kid, my sister was 4 years younger than me, so I was 10 and she was 6 when the Ultimate Warrior was in his first run as, like, a top dog. And to this day, I mean, we live a couple states apart, so we only see each other every now and then to this day. But she told me last summer, she was like, yeah, I was on this date with this guy, and he brought up wrestling. And my sister was like, well, if you're going to bring up wrestling, if you tell me that you're not an Ultimate Warrior fan, this date is done. And I was like, okay, wow, that is pretty cool. So then this Monday, when the Ultimate Warrior was on Raw for the first time in, 18 years, I took a picture of the TV, and I sent it to my sister, and she was like, she sent me a text and was like, I don't know if I should be super happy or super sad, because now this guy that was a huge part of our childhood is old. And of course, the next day, she sent me a text saying, okay, well, I'm just officially sad now. I can't believe this.
Well, you know, Josh, and not to be grim on this episode or anything, I hope people understand this, but at least your sister was better off with getting an old version of the Warrior compared to my sister's fandom of Chris Benoit. I mean, I'll tell you this, and I'm sure Paul and Sean know this story. I went to Vengeance with one of the co-owners of DirtSheets.com, David Martell, who's been on this podcast once or twice before. And we all went as a group. My sister does not really watch wrestling. She watched it with me when I was younger, WCW days, but not a big fan at all. But she went solely and paid a ticket just so she could go see Chris Benoit at Vengeance. That was, of course, the night that he was doing what he was doing with his family. So at least your sister didn't have to deal with that tragedy.
Yeah, okay, yeah, true, okay. In hindsight, yeah, that's yeah, my sister definitely had it off good.
Yeah, so you can remind her the next time you talk to her. At least she didn't have it that bad. But yeah, I mean, what? I'm just kind of curious. Did you did you talk to your sister after the tragedy happened? What was her response?
Not really. No, she just sent me. I mean, honestly, I didn't even post anything on the Facebook page when it happened. I was awake Tuesday night, and, like, I'm not a big Twitter guy. I have a Twitter account, but I follow, like, wrestlers, and that's it. So I think me and my wife were watching Family Guy, and I was just bored, went on Twitter, and I saw Triple H posted, Ultimate Warrior's died, I'm sorry to announce this. And I said that to my wife, and I'm like, this has got to be a joke. There's no way this just happened right now after we just saw him for the first time in 16 to 18 years. This is the first time we've seen him outside of YouTube 3 nights in a row. There's no way this is legit. Somebody hacked Triple H's account.
Yeah, honestly, Josh, I thought the same thing at first. I was very I was really curious if this was the truth. Let's just say it that way. And that's why I texted Sean and asked him, because I said, well, Sean, we'll get text messages. He also kind of keeps up on the newswire. He'll probably let me know if this is false or a fake. And when he told me it was real, then I knew it had to be real. And it's just a shame. It's a shock, and you're thinking, okay, this has got to be fake. There's no way. This is Twitter was hacked. He was just
exactly. Look, the timing is just so weird. Like there's no way this just happened like that. I cannot believe this. And I said that to my wife. I'm like, okay, Triple H is saying the Ultimate Warrior is dead, but this has got to be fake. There's no way that it's real.
Yeah, I understand. Sean?
Yeah, I just never... I didn't really think about it until I saw it on the .com, and then I was like, once they post it on there, it's pretty much, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then everybody else grabbed it, and then it was not a joke.
Exactly. Once I saw Triple H tweet it, I was like, okay, I'll go on all the ridiculous sites like TMZ. Oh, they're not reporting it yet. So, yeah, whatever. It's fake. But once WWE.com retweeted it and Stephanie retweeted it, I was like, oh my God, is this a sick joke? April Fool's happened like a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure Warrior probably would have resigned his contract again if they were making April Fool's jokes about him dying.
Yeah.
but I'm just like trying to think of anything that would make it not real because I didn't want to believe it.
Right.
There's nothing more upsetting than to see one of the people that you really thought of pass away. You always try to find a way to get out of it, and it's just there's no way. And here's another thing, and I'm just kind of curious, since I got you right here, Josh, on the line. I want to ask all of us this question, and of course you as well. There's been speculation out there, and there's been some kind of thought process on the death of Warrior, the fact that steroids may have taken a big part of this. And I mean, I don't know if it's the case. I don't want to even really speak that into existence because I don't know his personal dealings with that. I don't know him. I don't want to say that they actually happened. I don't want to bring that out, but I just want to throw this out there. I want to know your guys' thoughts. Nancy Grace actually brought this to attention and on TV with Diamond Dallas Page, who very well tried to defend the business.
Nancy Grace, really.
I know. I like, who was it? One of the other guys. Oh, Cody Rhodes actually tweeted and said she's just mad because a wrestler dumped her in the 80s. But long story short, she had Diamond Dallas on her page, our page on her show. But long story short, he helped kind of, I really not defend the business, but he kind of told her, don't always think it's that, understand that there's other, circumstances. But I want to know what's your guys' thought process on this. Do you think that could be a factor in this? Is this something we're going to hear more and more about as time goes on with the Ultimate Warrior's death, or how do you feel?
We probably will hear something about that, but until the facts actually come out, Nancy Grace needs to shut the hell up, just like Glenn Beck needed to shut the hell up last year. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. Shut up. When the facts come out, fine. But Nancy Grace actually, if I remember correctly, she said that Owen Hart's death was because of steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
That's how you know that lady don't pay attention at all.
Wow. What do you other guys think? What did you think when you heard about this, and what are your thoughts?
It's really upsetting, especially when you think about how wrestling is still perceived in the media. Great story today. I was in the car listening to ESPN radio with my dad. We went bowling this morning, and they were talking about Sean Merriman signing with the WWE, and they were making steroid jokes because obviously Sean Merriman got caught for doing steroids, and like how typical of him to sign with wrestling after that. I'm like, God, this is the exact shit that pisses me off about the media, because it's just horrible misinformation all the time, and it's like Nancy Grace. If she's not ashamed of herself, which she probably isn't because she gets paid to do whatever she's doing, but God, that is just an awful thing to do, especially so soon afterwards when you have people grieving, whether they're family or not or whatever. It's highly insensitive.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then there's that whole thing with CM Punk too, that Colin Cowherd was sitting there responding to a fake CM Punk Twitter saying that he was saying things about Warrior dying and all this stuff, and CM Punk hasn't even talked to anyone using his Twitter, let alone he's going to sit there and talk about Warrior.
Right.
So, stupid. Colin Cowherd loves to make himself look an idiot when it comes to wrestling stuff anyway, but still.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
I just think it's funny.
I remember Colin Cowherd, because I used to listen to his show, well, not religiously, but I used to listen to his show and kind of enjoy it. And then once Eddie died, I heard Colin Cowherd say, well, is that really a big deal? I mean, who knows Eddie Guerrero? Who is this guy? I'm like, dude, okay, I understand that wrestling is not a quote-unquote real sport. Maybe they're not as mainstream as football. But show the guy some respect. A guy just died. Show his family some respect. Don't play it off as like, oh, he's just a fake wrestler. Who cares? The guy's a father and a husband. Show some respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally agree. I think these media outlets feel like they can pick on professional wrestling because it's, it's a scripted, sports entertainment. It's what it is. And I think they sometimes get aggravated because wrestling is not, I don't want to say lower than it is, but it's got decent ratings. People still pay attention to it. You see arenas sell out, you see stadiums sell out for WrestleMania. So it's, definitely not on the decline. It may not be on the, a big rise right now, but it's definitely not on the decline. And so I think they get agitated about that, and they think, they are high and mighty above it. But they don't realize the athletes that is in the industry of professional wrestling. I guarantee you could probably put several of the athletes in the ring against some of those guys playing on the court, playing on the turf, playing on the ice. You could do it any day of the week, and I'm sure that these guys could outdo some of those guys. And they just don't think of it that way. They just think of it as it's a silly little thing, and they all are steroided up and blah, blah, blah. All those different stereotypes that they have in professional wrestling.
It's the redheaded stepchild of media, and it never gets the respect that it deserves. I think maybe that's why I was gravitated to it from a child. I was like, wow, everybody hates this fake thing they call wrestling. I kind of like it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was funny for me because I lived in a house where my dad just could not understand for the life of him why it was a thing for me. He's like, oh, this is a phase, you'll get out of it, and I'm still, in it now. And he even joked with my probably soon-to-be stepsisters at one point that here's the guy that likes soccer and wrestling and all these things you're not supposed to like. And he's almost 30, and my dad still hits at me for that, and I'm just like, you like what you like and you get into it, and a lot of people do get out of it after a while. They're not real fans, or it's out of being cool, so they just go, okay, forget it. I just think kind of like right now we're in this almost a 1997 period. We're in the in-between. I think it's going to take a little bit more for it to go skyrocket. I don't know that we're ever going to get Attitude Era level again, but I think it can definitely become popular again with just not Bryan, but a couple other guys, and you can get into another somewhat boom period. But that's another conversation for another day.
I agree. I think that it's. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Sean.
Oh no, go ahead, man.
No, I agree. I think that wrestling is about to hit another boom period. It's never going to get, at least TV ratings-wise, it's never going to get to the TV ratings point that the Attitude Era was, because at the Attitude Era, you had one option: watch it live or record it on VHS. Now you got these options where you can watch it on Hulu, you can watch it on YouTube, you can watch it on demand on any cable provider. And you got a network too, so if you don't see it now, you'll at least see it a month from now. So it's not like must-see TV. You have way too many options, which is a good thing, but it is also going to drag the ratings down, and it always will.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul, did you have anything you want to say on that while we're on that topic?
Oh, no.
Okay. Well,
go
ahead, Sean.
One thing I wanted to say is that, a lot of people are making a big deal about that stock drop because of the subscriber numbers. Just shut up already. Those are people just being negative.
Mm-hmm.
And they want it to fail, and they don't want it to go anywhere. And yes, there's a big chance that that's going to be lowered when the, get out time comes. But honestly, did anybody expect it was going to be at 1 million to begin with? No. I don't think anybody that had a realistic look at it did. I think that stock price was going to drop regardless, because they wanted WWE to merge with somebody. They wanted WWE to get bought out by somebody. They didn't care about the subscriber number at all. It was all inflated by hearsay and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the WWE Network will hit 1 million, because they've got 2/3 of the way there. They're already at 6,500 or 6,600, something around that area. That's only in the U.S. Once they open it up to Canada and the U.K., there's no way it's not going to hit 1 million.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, you do have to wonder how many people are using the fake VPN to get it in the Canada and the U.S. or the U.K. and all that. I know a few people that are already doing that.
Yeah,
so.
I could speak for about 10 people that I know of that are not in the U.S. that are doing it already. So,
and I'm sure WWE left that loophole there on purpose, but
Mm-hmm. I'm sure, but I'm sure you'll have more of the people who are, more on the straight and narrow, and they don't want to do that. They're just going to wait the time being, and I'm not sure. But I think they'll hit the 1 million. I really feel like they'll get there. Just some way, somehow, I think they will. The thing is,
I really hope so. I don't want to see the network get taken away.
Same.
Because,
I just don't want the network to be pushed up to where it's $19.99 a month, because once they do that, then why am I paying for this again? $19.99 isn't horrible, but $9.99 a month is completely, it feels like a bargain now. Maybe it's too much of a bargain. Once they move it up to $19.99, I'm going to be thinking a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the way a lot of people are going to feel, especially when you give somebody a low price. Then when you start raising it, they start questioning it. And honestly, if they would have started at $20, a lot of us may have said, well, it's worth it. You can't even buy WrestleMania in HD for $20, so it's worth that, and we'll pay. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people may say, well, you can't offer that lower price, $9.99, and then all of a sudden start jacking it up. You got to give it time.
I think they're going to have to start developing pricing tiers if they're going to even think about do like Netflix, where you get such and such thing if you do $10, such and such thing if you do $20. Whatever, and I also think they can't. I think they cannot justify a price hike without having Raw and SmackDown replays be around a lot earlier than a month.
Mm-hmm.
No way can they justify that, I think. You give it to people at $10, you don't have anything other than pay-per-views that's really original. How are you going to justify hiking it up $10 more?
Right, I actually do agree with that. I mean, I guess my big thing is I was wanting to get rid of Hulu because the only reason that I had Hulu was for NXT and SmackDown replays. Well, I get NXT on demand, SmackDown replays, yeah, that I do want to see them, but do I really need to see them that day? So now I have Hulu where I can see them the next day. We're on WWE Network. I have to wait a month, and by that time, who the hell cares about SmackDown a month ago?
That's what I was wondering.
The diehards that have to watch every episode.
Yeah. I know this has
Now, if
nothing
they
to do.
put Total Divas on the network, I will pay for that every month for the rest of my life with no problems.
Yeah, and, it's just going to be interesting to see where the network goes and how the subscribers stay, go, come, all that good stuff. Because they're going to have to keep this thing stable. They're going to have to continually adding things, making things better, because you've got to keep those people and those fans subscribing. Because a 6-month period is an easy time for someone to say, I've got a month left and I'm not so sold I still need this. You got to keep them interested, keep them wanting more. And I'm sure that WWE's been good about that. I think that they should be able to handle that job fairly well.
I know that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
As far as WrestleMania goes, I know Sean said that he had some problems. How did the rest of you fare with WWE Network as far as WrestleMania went? Because personally, I had zero problem.
I also watched it on the network at a friend's house. We didn't have a problem. We had like a quality drop a few times. Like the screen would get a little grainy every once in a while, but that was only really during the Battle Royal, and we just talked that up to too much happening on the screen.
All right.
I was behind everybody else watching WrestleMania. The reason being is because I got home a little later, and so things happened. I've ended up being like an hour behind, which was no big deal. I figured I can catch it. But the problem with that is as the stream is going, as the live stream is happening, it's continually updating and making sure the stream stays alive and gives a good clear for the people that are actually watching it live. So if I try to fast forward or play or get back to the spot that I was, if I catch the update when I'm doing that, it would completely go back to the beginning. And it was a battle, me versus the network updates. I caught up, though. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was my fault. And let's just say this. If I wasn't doing a podcast or if I wasn't trying to cover the whole show, I probably would have waited for the replay, to be honest with you. So to me, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't blame them. In fact, I commend them for doing a good job for guys like Paul watching it live and not the guy that's scrabbling an hour behind.
And honestly, I probably wouldn't have had any problems if I wasn't trying to constantly make it be live, because we had Chaz in there who was watching it on pay-per-view, and he kept telling us what happened like 5 minutes before we would get to see it, because it would eventually lag behind because of all the skip backs and all that stuff that it would do.
Right, yeah, that's why, I mean, I'm not, like, knocking Chaz or anything, but I did notice that, not just with the Facebook group, but Wrestling News Source on Facebook. I'm not even part of that group, but it would post stuff live that was happening. I'm just like, oh, okay, shut up, I'm not there yet. So I just kind of laid my phone down and watched the show, and it killed me because I didn't want to like comment on stuff that was going on to the Facebook group, but at the same time, every time I pulled my phone up, I saw something that I didn't quite want to see yet.
Mm. The price you pay for social media.
Right, exactly.
No matter how good it is, it's awesome. But when you're trying to keep up with everybody else, it's sometimes not easy.
Yeah, it's not 1993 anymore, where everybody is at least listening on Scramble Vision.
Yeah.
And listening to the same thing at the same time.
Can I tell you about Scramble Vision? Once again, I'm a WCW guy from back in the day. That was my first initial thing with wrestling. I was such a big fan of the angle with Jay Leno and Eric Bischoff and, of course, Hogan and all that, and Goldberg. And I didn't at the time, no one in my family cared about wrestling. They still don't. That's just me. So I didn't, at the time I couldn't purchase a pay-per-view. But I could listen to it on Scramble Vision. And so I did my darndest to hear that match on Scramble Vision. Because I was like, oh, they put Leno in? Leno's in the ring. I wonder what it looks like. Now watch
I was listening to it on Scramble Vision too, and once I saw it on actual video, I don't think we missed a whole lot.
No, we didn't at all. You're right. Oh man. Well, I don't want to cut our conversation or change this in a different, way. We've had a lot of fun, but I do want to ask you, Josh. I don't know what your schedule's like, but I want to ask you this another question before we get you. Unless you want to stay on, you're more than welcome to. But the question I have is the fact that we're talking about the Ultimate Warrior. This is a big, extra for the Ultimate Warrior. I'm kind of curious. He talked about legacy on Monday. He talked about where he is amongst the fans and where he'll land, years to come. I want to know where you guys think the Ultimate Warrior belongs in wrestling. Like, what tier of superstars does he belong? And, you could even throw out a top 25. You could even say, no, he's not even in the top 25. Tell me where he is in your rankings.
Me personally, I don't know. What kind of ranking are we talking?
It's your own
technical
opinion.
Skills.
However you feel you would rank him.
As far as what makes me a wrestling fan, I would say he's at least in the top 5. I would say Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold are battling for number 1. But Ultimate Warrior is definitely there, somewhere in the top 5. I don't know if he's 5, 4, or 3, but I mean, I'd have to actually sit down and think about that. But as far as people that got me interested in wrestling to begin with, he's got to be top 5, and that's not just because he passed recently. I mean, that was. As a child that got into wrestling, that was my guy. So he's got to be in that top 5.
For me, Ultimate Warrior's legacy will be the power of a gimmick, and how if you're really into it and you're at the right place at the right time, you can get anything over. And that's not to take away from the Warrior. He's a very special person because he was one of those guys who was willing to envelop himself in the gimmick so much that he pretty much turned into a different person whenever he was in the arena. But when it comes to the other side of the coin of wrestling, where it's wrestling talent and promos and all that other stuff, he's really not all that great. But I mean, and that's not to take away from other guys who made it to the top that way either, like Hogan. Who, at times is questionable on both, but the power of that gimmick and how talented he was to recognize that it was the gimmick getting him over, I think makes him very special. I don't think he'd crack my top 25, honestly, but that's not to take away anything from what he accomplished at all.
I would probably have him in my top 25 somewhere. Maybe top 15, maybe top 20. I don't necessarily look at, when I was a kid, as many kids were, I was drawn to those big guys, those guys that are larger than life, like Warrior, like a Hogan, like, even though I watched on and off, like I said, Paul got in earlier than both me and Gary, so he knows a little bit more just watching week to week from we do, but, Shawn Michaels is always going to be my all-time favorite, not necessarily that we share the same first and middle name, even though his are in real life are switched. I'm not named after the guy, but I always used to like to poke fun that I was to the people who didn't know the truth. I always think of Warrior like I said at the beginning. He's somebody that, even though I know this match is probably going to suck, just there's something about him that makes you pay attention. Mm-hmm. There's something about him that it's the presence, it's the entertainment factor, it's the whether I'm not going to understand one word that he says in those promos, or I laugh half the time that he's going to say it. There's something about it that makes you go, okay, there's something in there that makes sense, and you want to believe in that, and you want to. It does have to do with what Paul said, right? The character thing. He just so believes in his character. He changed his name to be part of that character, even to that extreme. I think he has a great legacy in WWE as far as if you take away all the other things that only people that are like us would know, all the negatives. He has probably one of the most everlasting musical themes that has ever existed in WWE.
Can't run without it.
Few that the moment that you hear it, you are energized. You are feeling that. You can feel yourself run with him when that music hits. It's just that's how iconic it is. His gimmick, his look, the face paint with the tassels, with the everything. Just to me. I don't necessarily think of when I'm talking about great wrestlers. I don't always look at the work rate, the wrestling ability, all that. He may not have been the greatest wrestler. He may have had to have some of the greats of the 80s really show him how it's done and help him along. It's the whole package for me. I think somewhere in that's why he would crack my top 20, top 15.
Okay, that's fair enough. And all of you so far have brought up some great points. And from my point of view, just thinking about it, I guess when I'm ranking guys, I don't just rank them on one thing in particular. I want to rank them how they were well-rounded. How they were as a worker, how they were alongside their gimmick, how well they used it, and that's the only reason Bill Goldberg even makes my list somewhere. Because honestly, he wasn't the best, at working in the ring. I mean, he was a brawler. I mean, he did what he could. I mean, but I was still a big fan, and that's what mattered. And I think the same with Ultimate Warrior. I mean, we just revisited watching quite a few of his matches when we watched the Ultimate Warrior's Ultimate Collection DVD, and that had a ton of his matches. And you could tell that he wasn't the best. And as Sean mentioned this earlier, he did have some great guys to work with that did help make his matches better. But that doesn't take anything away from who Ultimate Warrior was, his presence in the ring, his presence coming to the ring with that music like you guys talked about just a second ago. I mean, and the guy was great for what it's worth. And, sometimes a gimmick is just as important, if not more important, than which sometimes you can perform, because that's what the fans want to see. That's what they care about. That's how the Ultimate Warrior became a superhero. Let's just say that. His work in the ring didn't always make him that superhero. It was just him, who he was, his energy brought to the ring. He was a superhero. I like when Edge brought up this I don't know, I forget if it was a podcast or if it was written, I forget where it came from, an interview. But he said that's how he got into wrestling, was the fact that he loved comic books. And the fact that now he can watch the comic book come to life, and then he can actually go and see that comic book in real life. And that's what the Ultimate Warrior was. He was that superhero for a generation. And so he definitely, to me, he needs to be somewhere maybe in the top 25. I'd have to sit down and write my list before I could be honest with you guys. I mean, if nothing, the top 30 for me. But I think I probably would have him somewhere in the top 25 if it was just my opinion. But, you know, that's pretty much... Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, for sure. Hey, can I just say one more thing? Hey,
Yeah,
and then
ahead.
I'll get off.
No problem.
Before WrestleMania 30, I mean, Paul had posted something about top WrestleMania moments, and I commented on it. It was a brief conversation. I'm talking about WrestleMania 7, the career-ending match with Warrior and Savage, and then when Miss Elizabeth came out, and Savage and Miss Elizabeth reunited. How sad is it now that with Warrior, Savage, Elizabeth, Sherry, the only person alive in that whole scene is Earl Hebner. I mean, that really, like, that's like, wow. When you look at it now, it's like, oh my God, that wasn't that long ago. And there's only one person alive now, and it's the referee.
Mm-hmm.
So does anybody think Earl Hebner get into the Hall of Fame before Macho Man?
No.
So yeah, since he's in TNA, I don't think he's getting in.
Yeah, I mean, but everything you said, Josh, that is very. Every time we look back in history and you see something like that, you're like, wow, that is mind blowing that all those people are not with us anymore. Wasn't it? I don't know if somebody on this podcast mentioned or what, but there's I believe a Rumble or a King of the Ring or something like that. I forget what it was, but most of the people in that were dead. It's like, wow. It
really makes you feel old. It really does. When you look back and you're like, oh my God, these are my heroes, and most of them are gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was a huge Kurt Hennig fan, and so still to this day, I think he just left us too early because to me, he wasn't that old. My God, why is he not here anymore? There's so many people, and these guys were not old when they died. Most of the people you're talking about were fairly young, and that's the depressing part about it. So I mean, you just.
And especially the WrestleMania thing, that's like my mom doesn't watch wrestling either, but if you ask my mom about Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth getting back together, she will know exactly what you're talking about. But if you tell her, all those people are dead now, please don't ever tell her that because she will probably faint.
What? Oh man, wow. Well, you know, it's definitely interesting, and that's why I'm so glad we do have the network. We talked about it earlier. We can relive those moments and relive the people that we were big fans of. So in a way, they're not dead. I mean, they may not be with us any longer, but they still are. Every time we turn,
they're immortal now.
Yeah, just like the Warrior said, right? And that promo, it's the legacy. They're immortal. They move on. The Warrior will live forever, and so will a lot of those other stars you just talked about, Josh. So it's great. Well, any other last comments, Josh?
No. I guess I'm done. Just as always, thank you all for doing your podcast. It was great fun, especially reminiscing about my childhood favorite, the Ultimate Warrior. I think you all paid great homage to him. And we'll all miss him, but life moves on. I'll be listening to Wrestling to the Max Monday as well.
All right, thanks, buddy, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Well, we talked a lot about the Warrior and everything that's been encompassing him. But we have to talk about these DVDs that came out. Of course, one of them came out, I believe, 4 years ago, Sean? That was The Destruction?
No, it's like
6, I think.
12
was
years
it 6?
ago.
Wow, it's just amazing. Well, I've heard a lot about this DVD as of late, not because of the passing of Warrior, but because he was going to the Hall of Fame, so it's come up again. But The Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior was a DVD we wanted to check out. I personally didn't get a chance to check it out. I tried. I'm hoping in the future I can get a copy or find a way to do it.
You got to find it because you try to buy a copy that costs about $50, $60.
Maybe so. I don't know. I was hoping Paul had it.
I used to have it until somebody decided to steal my bag of wrestling DVDs. But yeah.
But that's one of the DVDs we want to discuss, as well as we are going to talk about the Ultimate Warrior Ultimate Collection. That's the one that they just recently came out with, really celebrating what Ultimate Warrior has done, and not only that, it's really his point of view. That's really what this is. So we'll get into all that more. But I think really where we should start is the destruction of the Ultimate Warrior. Some of the things that came out in this DVD were very interesting just because there was a lot of things that were said to kind of make Warrior, maybe not look so great. Some people were very kind to him in a way. They didn't bury him. But then you had others who did. But since I didn't actually watch it, I'm going to let you guys kind of talk about it. Kind of fill me in on some of the things that you felt that they were trying to portray the Ultimate Warrior as.
2005 was the year of the DVD, by the way, so 7.
Oh, okay. I thought it came out in 2002. Never mind. Still a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, that's a long time. It's been a long time since I've watched this too, so I'm going off memory here. But I remember, it's mostly the same stuff we've been talking about, right? He's just this sort of larger than life persona, and most of the guys were pretty keen to hit on that the most because that is what made the Ultimate Warrior special. They're fair. I mean, he had his lot of haters, simply because he came in and sort of, I'm not gonna say stole the spotlight, but I mean they pushed him to the moon as hard as they could whenever he came in. So I'm sure that ruffled a lot of feathers, as it would nowadays too, when somebody young comes in and gets pushed straight to the top right away.
Yeah, it's funny because if they would have been done now, they would have had a lot more about his early days. This is before they really started owning a bunch of stuff. They did own the libraries, I think, at this point. I don't know about WCCW, but I know they owned AWA at this point. And they certainly didn't own the UWF, which they own now. And so they have to talk about UWF in a picture with him and Sting being the Blade Runners, which now would have been given a lot more thought of without Warrior being there. Obviously, Warrior didn't have a lot of great things to say about it in his portrayal of the DVD. They kind of do go through his whole run. He actually started with his WCCW character in WWE, doing house shows as the Dingo Warrior. And Warrior will tell you he came up with the name in a promo. Bruce Pritchard will tell you Vince came up with the name. Whoever it is, whatever, it really doesn't matter at that point. They called him the Ultimate Warrior, and a lot of the DVD is kind of a burial. It's not necessarily so much a burial, honestly. I think for one, Warrior kind of took it out of context in that he doesn't, and even in his own DVD, he doesn't really talk about anything negative he does. In fact, he just kind of says it by, I took time off. Like, most people, and even Shawn Michaels to a certain point, he's had a lot more time to change and reflect and come to Jesus and do all that. And he's able to go back and go, okay, these are the things I did. I'm not proud of them, whatever. It was kind of fresh for Warrior, so I think he kind of just wanted to get his point out there. And then eventually, I think he meant for, and he says it too, he meant for a regular documentary to come out about him, and he probably meant for him to address those things that he did, like no-showing events eventually, the holding up Vince for money, which didn't necessarily happen the way that they portrayed in this DVD. They make it seem like he held a gun to Vince's head, and that moment at SummerSlam 91, he either paid him right then or didn't, and they released letters like, this year, and said that he actually did that like 5 or 6 months before SummerSlam 91. But then Vince got him on a technicality of, you said you would stay home, and that's what I don't like. So I'm going to suspend you because you said that, which, I think at the end of the day, they kind of hit on a lot of what he is, right? They hit on his weird promos. They hit on who he is, that his character kind of became this bigger thing than it really was. They make fun of the whole him changing his name. Actually, a lot of the wrestlers don't really make fun. I mean, a lot of the younger wrestlers don't make fun of him that much. Jericho and Christian, and they kind of say, even Jericho's like, he's kind of an underrated wrestler. I thought he was better than a lot of people actually give him credit for. They do talk about how people have to carry him. He wasn't the greatest wrestler, and I think even he will tell you, and he's said it before. He's like, he made a joke about it at the Hall of Fame. He said, I got blown up, really easily. They made fun of that, the whole him running to the ring and he get blown up before he even did the match. I think overall it is kind of makes him look negative. They buried the whole WCW thing, which is not true. His quarter hour that he did with Hogan, even though that promo was senseless, was one of the biggest quarter hours WCW ever did. It was like a 6.4, and Raw only got like a 3. So they were doing Brawl for All at that time, so of course anything Brawl for All would have been horrible, but still. Yeah, I mean, I think and even like I said, Hogan protects him a lot. You would think Hogan would be the first one, even though they had problems, would be to bury him, and he doesn't. He protects him, saying that, I'm the one that messed up the Halloween Havoc match, which is infamous because Hogan was supposed to blind him, and then he was supposed to make some big comeback, and he messes up the flash paper, and he doesn't even get to have it burn. It actually burns Hogan's eyes instead of Warrior's. So, it's just... even his comeback in, 96, he, buries Triple H was during that time where Triple H was the click thing and whatever. It didn't really go anywhere. It was really his early run, right, that got him the notoriety, and people just kind of looked at it as, did he really care? And even Warrior says it, he says there were so many times that he wanted to do other stuff. And they kind of reeled him back in. So that's what leads people to have this feeling of he didn't care about wrestling. Wrestling was secondary to him. He was a bodybuilder first. He says this. It's just... I think that at the end of the day, him suing WWE for libel for this DVD is just him trying to protect himself and not necessarily understanding that you did these things. Maybe not necessarily in the way that they portrayed it. Maybe they dogged you a little bit more than you really should have been. But you should have faced the facts that you did do bad things you shouldn't have done back then.
Yeah, and I totally understand, both sides of this conversation, because I could totally see where, WWE looks at it and says, this is what you're doing. You're trying to hold us up. And not only that, you're doing your own agenda. And when we bring something to you, it's not always something you're willing to go with. And on his side, I think he's a very strong-willed guy. I think he was a guy that knew what he wanted and really honestly felt like his thoughts were the right thing. I mean, to me, just from watching interviews, from kind of gathering a little bit of what his personality is like through, those things like interviews and seeing him on TV, I kind of feel like he is one of those kind of people where he feels like, hey, I'm smart, I know what I want, and this is the way it should be. And sometimes it's just not the way you can handle things. It doesn't always work your way. But that's just my personal opinion from seeing him. I don't know him personally. I can't really speak for that because I never was in a locker room with the guy. But it just seems to me like we hear more and more stories as time goes on about how the fact that he was just kind of odd, and in the locker room people didn't always get along with him. I've even heard some things where he wasn't always nice to the fans, and I wasn't sure if that was true or not. Yeah. And is that some of the stuff that they talked about?
He also didn't make it a point to be nice with the wrestlers either. It's not like he was a loner and he was okay with being a loner. Mm-hmm. From everything that you read, and he says this in a way, like I said, he didn't really make it a big point to love wrestling. He was focused on himself. You don't know how many times. I know you watched it, Gary. I know Paul watched. I didn't watch the whole thing. I was going to, and then I kind of got distracted. Just the part that just in disc 1, how many times he says, I focused on growing the character, Ultimate Warrior, and how I could do this and do that and do this. And it's like, that's things you probably wouldn't even hear today.
Mm-hmm.
That's stuff like, people would be talking about the other guys at some point. They'd be talking about how those wrestlers were great, how they helped him, how it almost seemed like it was very me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if later in the DVD he starts thanking some of these guys and whatever. I know he does kind of put over Heenan and whatever for that Weasel Suit match and whatnot from what I got to see, but it seemed like it was very one-dimensional, one focus with Warrior. I don't know. Y'all watched the whole thing, so...
Yeah, on the newer DVD, I skipped through the matches because most of the good ones on there I've usually watched a bunch of times. Like I've said it on my Facebook page, I think Ultimate Warrior Randy Savage is in my top 5 matches of all time. It's an absolutely wonderful match. If you've never seen it, go ahead, put that on your to-do list. But he's very respectful towards Savage, and I think Savage is probably the one he respected the most, just because they were both. He made it out to be that they were so similar. They both would get to the arena, and suddenly they're this other person that has to go out in the ring and perform and do all these other crazy things that they're going to be doing. And I think he just enjoyed the way that Savage and him worked. Because Savage, he said Savage was sort of a lone warrior guy in the back, which is kind of true too. Which I found very interesting, because his stories about Savage were very good, and I mean, with Savage having passed too, it's nice to remember those moments again too. But Savage, I think, is the one he mostly marks out for when he's not talking about himself. Mm-hmm. After that, Disc 3, it sort of gets a little rough, because that's him coming back around a second time in WCW and all that other stuff. And pretty much anytime anybody talks about WCW nowadays, especially when it gets to the end, with like 99 past, there's usually not good things said.
That's the truth. And honestly, I couldn't say much about it. I had checked out by then. So I'd already moved on to the other side of the green fence. But just kind of thinking about this, it is interesting, because I think Paul brought up a great point. It was Randy Savage, probably the closest to his personality, the only guy he really gave a whole lot of, props to, if nothing else, and maybe talked more about than anybody else, because anybody else, he was just kind of brief with it and just kind of moved on. Then kind of talked about himself again. And what that may just be his personality. It's so hard for me to sit here and say that I know a guy when I was never around him. I just see a video of him. But you can kind of tell someone's personality sometimes just by kind of sitting in a room and watching him. I just think it's so interesting.
Let's say this. I don't know how many of you, if you two have watched that. We're going to cover it more on Monday, but if you two have watched that Journey of Brian thing, compare to how Brian talks about all this stuff to the way Warrior talks about himself. I think that would give you a nice, more clear picture of Brian is more humble about things. He tends to talk about it in a more, not necessarily about me kind of thing, whereas Warrior's all about wanting to talk about me, So I think he was so into wanting to tell his side of the story so bad that I don't think he was even necessarily thinking about how things were coming off,
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
I don't, here's the thing. I think we all have different personality types. Let's just say it that way. Let's just say this. There are quiet people out in this world that are very kind people that are not anything snobby or anything like that, but they get a bad reputation because they don't talk to people in the room. People say that's just an arrogant snob over there, don't want to even talk to any of us, all that. It's not the case. It's just the way that person is. And I think that may be the way the Ultimate Warrior is. I don't think he was ever really out to hurt people. I think he just has a different personality type than a lot of the other guys in the locker room. And so I think he got a bad rap at times because people just thought he was weird and odd and just kind of a strange cookie. And he was. He probably was odd compared to other people, but that was just him.
Well, it's still weird to me that he talks about Ultimate Warrior as this character and like it has nothing to do with him. I'm like, this is so weird. It's you, man. You were this character. I'm like,
double personality.
I don't know if you get what I'm saying, but like, even The Rock calls himself by his real name, but he knows he's The Rock. He knows he did all these things. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, we're going to play a clip later that actually it's kind of funny because he even actually mentioned something about the Ultimate Warrior waking him up. I thought that was kind of funny. But, and you're right, Sean. It is kind of crazy that the guy, refers to, the Ultimate Warrior as a different person. It's not like joking. It's like, he actually is talking about a different person almost. But, I mean, when you said that he has the focus of getting that character, really creating that character, and he's focused on the Ultimate Warrior, really. I believe that, and I could totally see where he was kind of quirky in that way. Where, Randy Savage had his quirks. He was a very personal guy, very, very protective of his family, very, very protective of his wife. I mean, just if you even kind of crossed a certain line that you didn't know shouldn't be crossed, he would be all over you. And it would be something that no one else would even think was bad, but he thought it was bad. So there's just different personalities. I mean, there just are. And those are something you have to deal with. We see it in all these other locker rooms in sports. We hear about guys that, like, let's just honestly, Terrell Owens and Chad Johnson, those are kind of guys we can throw in that conversation of people that other people didn't get along with, but they were people that, did a good job. They just didn't get along with the locker room. Not all the time, at least. And so the Ultimate Warrior, I think, could be fit into that puzzle as well. But, I wanted to also talk about the fact that the Ultimate Warrior was a guy that, he had a fan base that was very, very loyal to him. But do you think that, that kind of fed this, dive into this character? Do you think that that's what, or do you think he was just obsessed and over making a perfect character? It's just so interesting to me that we saw him with the Blade Runners and then all of a sudden get to this point where he's just almost different. I know it's kind of different gimmick at the time, but he seemed like he was a little bit more lighthearted, and then further and further he gets into the gimmick, the more insane he gets.
And I think this is why he sort of had to separate the Ultimate Warrior from not actually being a part of his sort of psyche, I guess. Because he doesn't seem anywhere close to the character he portrays at all. Whenever he sits down and talks to you in the DVD or in his Hall of Fame speech or whatever. And some guys, they just have to do that. They need to compartmentalize the gimmick and put it somewhere else so that way they can pick at it and work at it. And sort of when the time comes, they have to become that guy, and he's just so different. I mean, you hear about this in acting all the time. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Heath Ledger died. He put the Joker aside, he had to compartmentalize it, and then he had to become that guy, and he was so into it, it just sort of overcame him at points, and unfortunately, it took his life. But I think it's sort of the same story with the Warrior here, minus, the death part. Well, the gimmick being the reason why he died, not the other stuff. But at any rate, I think that's whenever you're so wound up in a person, people recognize that, and people are drawn to that because, it takes a lot of talent, I think, to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't really, it's just more of I felt like you can kind of talk about yourself in retrospect and not have to necessarily put the character aside, because you are talking about Ultimate Warrior. You're talking about that character that you built, that you created, that you kept going for all these years and is still going. That's the only reason. To me, I think that's when you can be a great actor. You can be a great character is that maybe you're not that person at all, and you have to become that person, like you said, and then you just play that person so well, but you're able to, at the end of the day, you get home and you're just yourself now. You know, a lot of the guys now, they kind of play a part of themselves, so you kind of don't know who's just totally a character and who's not. But back in the day, you had, and especially like in the early '90s with the new generation, you had so many of these there are these characters, and it's like, oh my god, where the hell did you get Bastion Booger from, and all these people,
Mantar.
Yeah, Mantar, and even later to like the Boogeyman and stuff like that. It's like, I cannot imagine that guy really ate worms for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But still, it's just, I think at the end of the day, that might have been what led him to do some of the things he did. Like you brought up, like the fandom, the whatever. Let's put this in perspective. I know we're talking about maybe this whole holding Vince up for money didn't happen the way that the DVD portrays it. He did ask for it, and then because of technicalities, Vince kind of got him later. We got to think about it like this: when a sports figure holds up a team for money, the only person that's really losing out is that sports figure. Yes, the fans want to see that player. Yes, that player makes that team better, but you're there to see the team. With wrestling, that person is advertised, that wrestler's advertised just like CM Punk, right? They had to refund people money that felt like, oh, CM Punk's not going to be here, okay, I'm leaving. And so Vince felt the same way, right? Like, well, Ultimate Warrior is advertised to appear at SummerSlam 91. I kind of got to agree, because I've got all these people here that want to see Ultimate Warrior. Whereas if, you come into a season and say Tony Romo just says, screw it, I'm retiring, or I'm leaving, or whatever, the Cowboys still step on the field with or without Tony Romo. Mm-hmm. So I think in a way, you can talk about how this didn't happen that way or whatever. I think Vince was in all right kinds of, he had every kind of right to suspend him or fire him or whatever. Mm-hmm. Because you just don't do that to somebody. That's the worst thing you can do, is go, oh yeah, I'm just not going to show up. Oh yeah, you don't give me almost $600,000, which back then was a lot more money than it is now.
That's still a decent chunk of change.
Yeah. So, I'm just saying, for, a performer now, like, even, still, you don't see guys make that much money now, but I'm just saying, like, I'm sure Hogan was making much more than that, and he just wanted to be paid on par with Hogan, and I understand that. Like, he was probably number 2 or number 3 guy, and I can understand him wanting to be paid that, but as Hogan says in the DVD and as other guys say, there's a time and a place for that.
Yeah, definitely. And most people, if you go into your job and you demand something, it's not going to, be a very good idea. Let's just say it that way. Because you can demand and you can, but and say, oh, I'm not going to be at work tomorrow if I don't get this. They won't care. They'll just be like, well, the company moves on. We move on without you.
Yeah, and then about 90% of jobs, you're replaceable.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And then even doctors, even lawyers, like my dad tells me, he's like, if for some reason something happened to me and I couldn't respond to the on-call, they just call another doctor. Even though what happens to me is severe, I get a big penalty from the head of the board and all that kind of stuff, they have to have another doctor in place in case something happens. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. It's an interesting conversation, too, when you're talking about the fact that, it was partly Warrior's fault for, trying to, basically hold a Vince and, all this. And I totally understand that probably did happen. And, we just don't know all the exact facts because it's always he said, she said. The cool thing in the end was the fact that, they did bury the hatchet. I'm so glad that happened because as you probably watch that destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, sitting there thinking, man, he wasn't this, just wonderful character that you would think he was. But, we're all at fault for different things. None of us are perfect. And, we're putting him under a magnifying glass right now. That's what we're doing. But I think a lot of times when you do that, you also look too closely and look too hard when it's not always exactly like that.
Right.
But, we're going to also mention something else I was trying to think. I think I kind of lost my train of thought.
There's the, this could have led to possibly his death in that, kind of like Eddie, where Eddie supposedly, now there's supposedly this report that says Eddie, even in like 2005, was named in this steroid scandal thing that had a bunch of other wrestlers in it. So maybe he wasn't totally clean. I just don't want to think about that, honestly, because it makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
But Eddie was one of my favorites of all time, especially being a Latino, one of the first like Latino big time champions, and I got to meet him and everything. But still, Warrior, very much like most of the guys in the 80s, he took steroids. He was actually named in that steroid scandal thing where he wanted Warrior to testify for him in that scandal thing, and Warrior said no. And in fact, I think Warrior tried to sue Vince because he wanted him to basically lie for him in court and all this stuff, we don't know how much of, whenever Warrior got off stuff or when he was ever, on it or whatnot. He was a big time bodybuilding guy. He mentions that several times in that Ultimate Collection thing. Do you guys think that might have possibly played a role? I mean, because once that stuff gets in your body, man, it seems to have an effect that goes on for a long, long time, no matter how much. Kind of like any other kind of drug, right?
Mm.
It doesn't matter how long you've been clean. It seems like that kind of thing rears its ugly head at some point. Do you guys think that might have had something to do with what happened, or?
It's hard. I think it would be ignorant of us to say that it didn't. I think it did. I was trying to say, it'd be stupid if we didn't say it probably did or something like that. But I think when you bring up Eddie had so many other problems from his past that I think caught up with him, other than just if he ever did steroids. When it comes to Warrior, and we're talking about guys in the 80s where whether they were encouraged or not was refuted on multiple occasions, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who, were saying, hey, take these and you'll be awesome or whatever and look great and all this other stuff. But that was the body type they were going for back then and all that. And I think naive is the word I'm looking for. It'd be naive of us to think that he got there all the way naturally. And if he did, good on him. But, heart problems, we know this stuff causes heart problems. It did whenever you're trying to pump your body up and all this other stuff, it puts a huge strain on it. And if he did do it, then I would definitely say that steroids probably had a part in it, but he didn't die because of it, I don't think.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Paul said. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, we all know the effects of steroids and the strain it puts on your heart. I mean, it's one of those things like, it affects you, but it doesn't affect you right now until later down the road. And so I think this could be the situation. I think that we may find out some more information maybe a week from now, maybe even sooner, I don't know, that, they did pay, some attribute to his death. And it is sad to think about. You really do, because you just wish that wouldn't be the case. But we all have things that we put in our lives that are going to kill us. You're drinking a soda and you think, oh, this is great, but it's affecting you.
Jeez, Gary.
I'm just saying, I'm doing the same thing, man. So I'm just saying,
no, yeah, you're
calories, eating a cheeseburger, it's delicious, but it's taking a toll on you. And honestly, you got to live life. You can't take away from, but drugs or steroids are something you can do without. And I think this is a testament for many young people out there who are thinking about doing things like this and taking different supplements and things that are, possibly harming to your body. You don't understand that they could take a toll on you, and you may live you could live a shorter life because of it. So, I mean, it's just a warning. If this does happen to be, this is just another warning to the younger people.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a warning to WWE that this path that you're going on with these smaller wrestlers and stuff, you may not like the way that it's perceived, but it's healthy in the longer run because you don't have these guys getting fake pumped up just so they can make a shot at becoming a champion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to live their dreams. It's I hate it for Benoit. He was so small anyway. He was so short that he had to take that and testosterone supplements just to be able to get to a certain build that he could be seen as believable by Vince and whoever was, just so they could maybe take a look at him or something. It's sad. But obviously people were naive back then of the perils of that. Now we know so much more than we knew back then. Now we know so much more about the concussion things and whatever. Now when even Samoa Joe hadn't wrestled since the end of March because he's had a concussion. It's just it's weird, like how I wonder if anybody's ever gonna do some kind of NFL thing and go, okay, we're just gonna sue Vince and whoever for all these concussion things.
Well, and I think that's what Vince's worry has been as of late, and not because just the suing, but I think he's also probably concerned about the health of wrestlers, especially since Benoit and concussions. And they've been working very closely with doctors, and as we've seen, guys have lost pushes just over a concussion. Ziggler's one of them. It's just a sad deal, but at the same time, they're trying to think intelligently because one concussion affects your rest of your life, because from that point on, you're more susceptible to concussions, and once you start having them, it doesn't exactly mean they're going to stop. Christian, look at Christian. We've seen how many concussions this Christian had now. I don't think we can count them on both hands.
And I mean, wrestlers shouldn't feel bad because sports players have to deal with the same thing. I mean, how many times have we seen a football player get knocked out of concussion, and that's one of the key players in the game, and they lose because that player doesn't step on the field again? It's just, it happens, man. It sucks for the wrestlers because it's such a week-to-week thing, and even though they have downside guarantees and everything, they'd much rather be out there, entertaining crowds and getting pushes and whatever, and it kind of sucks, but it's better for their health and stuff.
No, absolutely.
It's eventually at some point it sucks. Warrior did get kind of, I don't know, the story goes that Vince suspended him because they had to make that steroid policy because of the scandal thing, but supposedly somebody tricked Vince into making him think that it happened. I don't know. It's all, whatever. But, what's... I don't want to get onto this too much because it doesn't really have to do with the character. It has to do more with him. But he does get controversial in his, public speaking, which is, they make fun of that in the Self-Destruction DVD that, oh God, Warrior public speaking, I can imagine what he's going to say. He's going to talk about the planets and rockets and whatever. But no, he comes off as a real smart guy during these speeches. He said something about, the people from Katrina that wasn't very nice, and he said something to gay people that wasn't very nice either, that he apparently tried to correct by saying that, well, I mean, if everybody was gay at the end of the day, how are we going to keep reproducing? Which, that doesn't make it any better, but, whatever.
Yeah. Jeez. There's a reason now that, we have people that watch your Twitter handles on WWE.com, whatever they use. Because you can't
imagine if they had Twitter back in the 80s and early 90s. God.
Oh man, imagine Jake Roberts then. Woo!
Imagine Flair.
Oh, Flair. Oh yeah. Good God.
Flair would have been drunk tweeting every day.
We're talking about a guy who would hop on a private jet and then go out on the whole week, just go on a bender. I mean,
wow. Yeah. there's, it's just amazing what it would happen. But he definitely showed, Sean the Warrior, that he's matured, and he's past making those comments. I think he probably felt at the time that what did he have to lose, and it's his opinion, and he's a very opinionated guy. You can tell he really is, and that's okay.
All those blog posts.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what I can't say that I blame him for anything that he wants to say. It's his opinion. We all have our opinions, and you may not agree with him. I don't agree with everything he said, but I mean, it's his opinion. And me and Paul and Sean all have different opinions about things, but that doesn't mean we're not friends. Doesn't mean that we don't enjoy talking to each other. It just means that we have just different thoughts, different ways of doing things, and that's okay. That's great. That's what makes us us. So I mean, I don't look back at anything a Warrior said and said that diminishes his character in my eyes. It doesn't. To me, that was just Warrior. That's what he felt. Okay, big deal. And there's a lot of your heroes in wrestling that you probably would be shocked if you knew all their inside thoughts.
Yeah, that's what after hearing him, I think that's why that old saying goes: you don't necessarily want to know the truth about your heroes. Mm-hmm. You may not like what you find out.
No, exactly. That's the truth. But it's, and I want to touch on something, and I don't want to take away from what you're saying, Sean, because if you want us to keep talking about it, we'll continue on this path.
No, really. I mean, there's not much to say. We weren't at these speeches.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have to pull out transcripts and stuff. And I don't want to sit there and find it, because mostly this guy really is a smart guy, and he did have things to say. Mm-hmm. That were instructional to these kids and to whoever it was that he was talking about in these lectures. It's not like he just went out of his way to bury people with these lectures or talk badly about them. He just said what he felt, right? So.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And so, talking about that, separating the character from the man, I think it'll be very interesting to see when we get, Undertaker, when he is going to be going into the Hall of Fame, when Mark comes to play and not the Undertaker. Do you guys think that that'll be something that
I wonder who we're going to get on Stone Cold's podcast when he's on.
Mm-hmm. That's what I want to know as well.
If we're going to get Mark or we're going to get Undertaker.
Yeah. And that's what makes me wonder about the Hall of Fame. When he is inducted, are we going to get Undertaker or are we going to get Mark? And I think we'll get Mark. I really don't think that he's going to be... I mean, I think he's had that gimmick for so long and he's lived it and he hasn't strayed away from it. Well, besides, kind of on it. Let's just be honest. Well, the biker taker.
For the most part, WWE tries to forget about that.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. But just saying all that, I'm really curious. Do you guys think that they'll let Mark come out to play and just sit down and discuss Undertaker, or do you think they're going to try to keep this to the very bitter end? Because I really want to know. They let, of course not let, but the Ultimate Warrior was a separate person. Do you think they would do it for the Taker?
Absolutely. I think in the Mankind DVD, he was, more of himself. He wasn't really Taker or anything. He was just talking about Mick and all that. I think it's the same for the Ultimate Warrior. In his DVD, you got the very real sense that the person behind the makeup was just an incredibly driven person who wanted to succeed in multiple ways. And if that was the point, then it came across very well. Because, whether he was selfish and all of that or not, but he seemed very driven the entire time, whether he really cared about wrestling or not. I think we'll get it with Taker too. I'm sure there's 1,000,001 stories that guy could tell too, but
mm-hmm.
Yeah, he deserves his own DVD, just being able to tell his story from being Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that happens eventually. Having an Undertaker Ultimate Collection, I think, would be great. Because so many people have to tell his story for him because he doesn't ever get to not be that gimmick. Which is understandable, It's great that he wants to protect it as much as he does. I'm glad that he came out as Undertaker for Paul Bear's thing, and he didn't just come out and talk and kind of ruin that mystique,
Mm-hmm.
Because that's who we remember him as with Paul Bear. We don't see him as the badass Taker or whatever. He was the dead man. He was the guy that held up the urn and did all that stuff, If we want to talk about speeches, I think, definitely it was crazy that Warrior talked for almost an hour. It really did kind of feel eventually that he would talk for an hour because it kind of did meander. He touched on everything he could really touch on in that thing. I enjoyed it for what it was. I think the fact that he didn't make it as controversial as a lot of people were thinking it was, he's just going to bury everyone, showed his maturity too, that he was ready to be that ambassador for WWE, and it kind of does. That's the thing that made me sad, was he announces this whole contract signing thing, and he doesn't even get to live one day in that ambassador role, getting to see what he would have done for WWE, what he would have done for himself, how he could have changed WWE for the better, or gotten people to watch again because he's there, or whatever, That kind of made me sad, because the speech showed that he had changed his life for the amount of time that he had decided to do that. He would begun bury hatchets and all that, and he had probably had more to bury with other people. And it's sad that he didn't get to fully do that too.
Mm-hmm.
But at least we got to see him deliver that message, and we don't get to see him in this bad light that I think we would have had we not seen him go into the Hall of Fame the weekend before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we've all made some great points, and really, what else can you say? I think there's a lot, speculation around the career of the Ultimate Warrior. There's been a lot of things that we can touch base on and say these are our favorite moments. This is who we love about, this is what we love about him. This is who we think he is. And I think we touched on a lot of those things. And if you guys want to add anything else, is there anything else you'd like to say before we move on?
Do we want to play that clip?
Actually, that's that's exactly what I want to do. If you have any last comments, I would like to get them now, because I think it's kind of fitting. Let's give Ultimate Warrior the last word here. Let him kind of talk, and then we'll come back and talk about our thoughts on the Hall of Fame before we close this thing out. Anything else you want to say?
Let's do it.
All right, let's play that clip.
All right, this is Ultimate Warrior talking about his legacy, the character, what he thought about the Hall of Fame before it actually happened, a bunch of stuff. It's about a 4.5-minute clip. So, enjoy.
I want to give a speech that people never forget. I want to say things that are much more than just, stories from the road and stuff. Because my career means more to me than that. Having had my career just means so much more to me than just what I did in the wrestling ring or what I did in those arenas. I've lived so much more life outside of that, in the arena of the world since then. One of my virtues is that I've always paid attention to what's going on in my life and the experiences I've had, and I've always been introspective anyway. And so I think about it all. I think about having those kind of experiences back then and being that just physical freak and just explosive and energetic and being allowed to do that. And then later in life, time goes by and you get older, and there's some things you got to sit down and you got to reevaluate, and you got to say, okay, where did I go here? Where did I get my motivation? How can I be inspiring now? How can I do that? Well, Vince asked me a couple years ago to go into the one I think they had in Phoenix, and I said no. I said they had to tell the right story. So we negotiated for 2 years to get to the place where I know they're going to tell the right story. The guy portrayed on the DVD, the self-destruction DVD, isn't a guy that would be asked or wouldn't be inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's all nonsense. You don't bring a guy back to the company, a persona back to the company that's a waste of time. You don't bring him back 3 separate times. And so that's what I mean by that. And so I'm excited to get beyond that and, tell the right story. It's an incredible story. The Ultimate Warrior character was such a delight in the business. In other words, it could have just been left alone. it was fun. It was energy. It's something that people haven't forgotten. They've continued to remember. It could have been just left at that. And to go and personally, to really attack it in a way like it and rewrite its history is, it pisses me off, but it makes me sad. It hurts my heart. The fact that it happened has really been instrumental in me viewing life or viewing myself as a man, as a husband, as a father in a lot of serious ways. What success does to myself, but what it also does to other people. I mean, I've said before, Ultimate Warrior is like a muse to me. He's a guy that smacks me every morning and says, don't feel sorry for yourself. Get out there and make it happen and stuff like that. So, and he always will be. But, I want him to keep running. Just keep running, man, into the future and keep inspiring people and stuff like that, and he will. But it represented one stage of life that I think is okay for a man to want to have, and every man should have, to go out and be competitive in a world in a really serious way, in a very intense way. And Ultimate Warrior is like an archetype of that. It represents all those things on all those levels. But there's also a different time in your life where you need to step up to a different level and be something different. And that has happened for me. I'm comfortable with that. And I think that I've proven myself to be a good representative of that. I mean, Ultimate Warrior was so one of a kind and unique. You can't go back, and you just come to a point in time when you can't go back and people have a visual of that. That's what they have a visual of. That's what they want, is that thing. So I want them to keep that. I want them to keep that. It's okay. You keep it. It's cool. It's yours, and we'll be all right.
All right.
Well, at least, we let the man have his last word. So, well, let's move on, guys. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame. And we've talked about the Warriors Hall of Fame, but let's go ahead and talk about everybody else who was a part of the Hall of Fame. On Monday, like I said, we had such a packed show. None of us had the opportunity to really delve into, each speech or anybody else we wanted to talk about. Any of these speeches really stick out in your guys' mind? I'll just say this, Jake Roberts was one that I really enjoyed. What did you guys think, and who kind of stuck out in your mind?
I still haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I've been so busy this week.
Oh, have you? Oh, that's fine. Sean, did you get a chance? You watched the whole thing, didn't you?
Yes. Jake Roberts' speech is one that I can hear over and over and over again. If you are a wrestling fan, I think he paints a picture that is very true for anyone that wants to aspire to be a wrestler, or anyone that is a wrestler, or just as a fan, to be able to kind of get inside of his head, and understand that he was like not only addicted to the drugs, he was addicted to the business, he was addicted to the wrestling, to the everything. It consumed him. And then he talks about not trying to be his father who allowed the business to consume him, and then he became the same thing, and just all the things that he learned from that, and his recovery from the DDP yoga thing. And I love DDP's story about the Cobra thing. That was great. It was hilarious. Warriors was great. Razors was so short that I think it kind of was good enough. You got to hear all his little lines, and he kind of thanked everyone. And I think Kevin Nash probably talked longer than he did. I love Lita's because Lita was my favorite diva ever. I love the fact that she kind of just got to joke around and tell her kind of a story of how she made it, and from the beginning to the point where she just kind of wanted to end it. And I thought everybody's was kind of interesting in a way. There was never, other than Mr. T's, which just went totally off the rocker, and I think at one point I just hit the skip button because and Kane had to come out and end it because it was just so, long, prolonged, and something. Come on, at some point, I don't care what's going on with him. I don't know if there's something wrong with the guy or he just was so in the zone about thinking his mother and all this stuff. Just like, dude, you're a celebrity entrant in a wrestling Hall of Fame. It's an honor to have you there. You deserve to be there, but not for you to have the longest speech besides Warriors in the entire night.
Just to talk about your mama.
Yeah, exactly. And Carlito for president? No, I'm joking.
Oh my God.
Him and who knew Primo could actually talk on the microphone?
Mm-hmm.
That guy made you want to pay attention to what he had to say about his dad. So props to all of them. Carlito made it a funny thing. Carlos, from what you could understand, because he had a really rough accent, and then he talked in Spanish half the time. His was good. Good God, his head is so bladed. It's hard looking at the guy. Like I said, I thought everybody did. It's worth watching for sure. It's really exciting just for Jake and Warrior speeches alone. Just totally skip Mr. D.
Yeah.
and you'll be good.
Well, it was great to watch. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I think a majority of the people that spoke were quite interesting, and I had a interest in most of them. So, I mean, I think Sean pretty much hit on all the high points. Here's the big question. Now, with Ultimate Warrior, with Jake Roberts, with Razor Ramon, all these people were people that we said will probably never make the Hall of Fame because of their lifestyle, what they're doing, or maybe their beefs with the company, with Vince McMahon himself. But it seems like Vince has gotten older. He's started burying the hatchet with a lot of these talents. Just becoming, I guess, letting everybody be mature about it, grow up. And, of course, all the people I'm mentioning also had to do their own fighting demons and getting to the place that they needed to be worthy of a Hall of Fame induction. So you can't forget about that. It's not all about Vince. They had to do their part as well. Who would you expect and who do you hope gets the opportunity to be a part of this Hall of Fame that maybe Vince has an issue with, or maybe they have an issue with the company, or something like that? I'm kind of curious what you guys think.
Oh, man. Drawing a big, huge blank right now, to be honest with you.
Macho Man, for sure.
Macho Man? Yeah, we've talked about that.
I think he's number one on pretty much everybody's list, probably, of the guys Vince has a problem with. That it sucks that he's passed away, because he could probably circumnavigate that controversy of, does it really have to be everybody in your family? Whatever the whole issue is, whatever that issue is between him and Vince, could get squashed a lot easier if he was there. A lot of people now are in that, are from that era. I mean, the only...
We need Owen Hart. Let's say that. Let's hope.
Owen, yeah, that thing with, Martha's gonna have to... I would hope that someday Martha just gets over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I totally get being bitter towards the company that basically, your husband died working for, and it was kind of their fault, the person doing the whole rigging and everything. But there's got to be a point where you got to say, look, he had a great career in what he did for a living, what he enjoyed doing. Let him have his time. And I think it's worth it, even though you may be bitter. It's about him. It's not about you, right? That's what I would think, at least. So, I'm sure the rest of his family wants him there, for certain. So.
Oh, yeah. Brett's talked about that, and so has all the other Hearts, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I think all of us hope that, the greats get in. That's the important part about the Hall of Fame.
And, I mean, I know maybe these two aren't, but I honestly think that if you're going to induct DX, I don't care about her, whatever pornography stuff she did or whatnot. China deserves to go in.
Mm-hmm.
at least as part of DX, if not by herself, for all the things she did as a woman in WWE. The first to do so many things. I think you can't legitimize the women's division, honestly, until you put her in. I know you have some of the greats of Moolah and May and Trish and Lita and all that, but I think Chyna's right up there with all of them.
They haven't put Sable in yet either. I think Sable should go in, and I know she has beef.
I wouldn't be surprised if Sable goes in the year they put it, whatever year they put in Brock.
Mm.
Wow, wouldn't that be funny? The first husband and wife duo in the Hall of Fame.
I hope they put Elizabeth and Macho Man in it the same year before they do that, but whatever.
They should. They really should. And I agree with you about Chyna being in the DX. Because I think it was, I totally get family friendly and all that, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, I still think that it had been so great at that Raw 1000 to have everybody be a part of DX, not just, one missing. You know what I mean? I was really hoping that would happen. And in the past, she said that her and Vince would have discussions, and he, said that there was no big beef between them. So I would hope that in the future we may actually get to see that Hall of Fame.
Probably still Stephanie more than anybody else.
I'm sure. But hopefully, if there's nothing else that she's learned from her father, you can't hold grudges. And if you hold grudges, it just hurts everybody and it hurts the company.
That's the one problem I'm seeing, is that it seems like Triple H and Stephanie are going to be the ones to hold grudges as opposed to Vince.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like Triple H is all cool with getting all the old guys, but when it comes to guys that cross them, it seems like they can't think out of the box for that.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that scary, though? Because we all know Vince won't be around that much longer. I'm not saying tomorrow or anything, but I'm just saying he's up in age right now. And, before you know it, he's going to be, 90 and on. and sooner than later, I'm sure he's going to want to go ahead and enjoy the rest of his life. Not worry about business, not worry about showing up at meetings. He's going to want to spend the rest of his life.
I don't know about that, Gary.
I think Vince is going to die. He's going to die in that chair, man.
You think so?
Vince will die in a meeting. Vince will die.
You guys are probably
doing Raw.
He's probably just like Jerry Jones. He'll probably make sure that he's in every decision-making process until he's in the dirt.
Yeah, unless he goes completely bonkers or something, I think he'll be in that chair till he dies.
Well, you guys are probably right. I'm sorry. I just would think with all that money that he has, you'd want to go enjoy it a little bit and not just be.
I don't think it's about money for Vince. He built this place with his bare hands, essentially. He took it from his dad and made it from a regional territory into this dominant powerhouse. I don't know how you walk away from that. I know I couldn't.
Well, I probably wouldn't be able to either.
Yeah, look at how many times he's tried to make it something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about this too is the fact that it's always nerve-wracking turning over something you've been doing a long time, something you built, and you give it to someone else, and you're just thinking they're just going to run it to the ground. I better not let that happen. I better hold on to it. Right. So well, it seems like we've talked about everything we needed to talk about. Unless you guys have anything else you'd like to mention, this has just been a fun extra. I've really enjoyed myself.
Since we're talking about network stuff and whatever,
go ahead.
You want to talk about Sean Merriman for a second?
Sure, we can mention it. We may.
I liked him on the pre-show. I really liked him on the pre-show. I thought he felt at home there with everybody. He kind of just came off as this big fan that so happened to play football.
Yeah. But him filling up another chair, I don't know. If he takes
Alex Riley's spot, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. But Alex Riley's the closest thing they have to a guy who wrestled and now is sort of. Well, no, they have Booker for that. Never mind. Yeah, get rid of Alex Riley.
Man, so much Alex Riley hate. Wow. You know what? Honestly, you're probably right. That's probably the lowest guy on the totem pole, and he can go and maybe go back to NXT. Actually wrestling and not being a commentator. But I think it's an interesting sign. I really do. just because of the fact that he's from a different sport, and yeah, he's a giant fan, but just to have him on the team, it makes me wonder what direction they're going to go with him. Like, are they going to keep him, in NXT? Are they going to use him in different forms? Are they going to make him a guy that can travel around and rep the company, maybe? I'm just kind of curious what form they're actually going to use him. So, I mean, it's really exciting, though. I mean, I know Sean, when he was telling me about this, he was pretty excited about it. And I did enjoy him, just like you guys did on the pre-show of WrestleMania. I just want to know where they're going to use him.
I think it's a case of trying to bring more legitimacy in any way possible that they can.
Could he be the guy that does the studio show with Coach?
Could be. Could be.
That would be really interesting. I mean, those two guys, I could see them working very well together.
A Sports Center guy and a, ex-football player. I mean, that seems pretty legitimate to me.
Mm-hmm. Now they just need to go out there and get Bill Romanowski, and I think they're set.
Make sure he takes his medicine.
Oh, God, yes. Otherwise, we may have another Mojo Rawley on our hands.
Well, yeah, Mojo Rawley owes so much to Ultimate Warrior.
I know. It's funny you say that, because I've been thinking about Mojo Rawley and thinking, man, he just really took what Ultimate...
That would have been so cool to see Warrior come out with Mojo Rawley one time.
That would have been, wouldn't it? Wow. I think as a tribute, he should do something, Maybe not wear the face paint.
I could see him doing it. I could see him wearing the tassels or the mask or something.
Yeah.
He's that crazy.
Adopt the Gorilla Press Slam so you can stop doing the rear view.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah, please. I'm sure he could just get Big E to not do the body press thing and just adopt his whole finisher.
Mm-hmm. Hey, they'd be a lot better. Trust me. We're done with the rear view. We are.
And the earthquake
hyperdrive.
The hyperdrive, yeah. Oh, please. Please.
It's so terrible.
Save us, Jericho. Oh. But anyway, well, is there anything else you guys wanted to mention? I don't want to cut anybody off. I want you to make sure you have your fill.
Well, would have been cool to see if, Sting did come back. See the Blade Runners reunite on TV one time. But whatever.
I love that Sting tweeted out a picture of him and Warrior in 1985 when they were hanging out. And, when he was giving his condolences. I thought it was really cool,
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We may be seeing Sting, in the future, sometime down the road. We keep hearing rumors, but we don't know what's true and what's not.
Yeah, it seems like this one's a bit more concrete, but he's still got indie bookings till June, so who knows?
Yeah.
Of course, WWE could easily pay those people, and then he didn't have to show up. So.
Well, not only that, what's the rush?
Yeah, I mean, WWE can sign him and let him finish out, too.
Mm-hmm.
They do that all the time.
Well, they could sign him, but it depends on how quick. I mean, I was thinking about this today, and this could be something more for Monday, but do you guys think they're going to try to really keep this authority thing going and try to make authority against Bryan the new Vince and Austin?
Yes.
Keep it going until they just cannot go anymore?
Yep.
Until no one cares at all?
Yep. All yes.
In cap letters.
We've already got it for Extreme Rules.
I mean, it just makes sense right now. It's a good launching platform for Bryan. They can pull anybody in they really need to, and you have the Shield that just turned off of this. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways they could go with all of this, I think. So, I definitely think it's smart for now. I don't know if he'll take it into next year or anything, but
I think that's where you easily put Sting in as a GM, and it eventually leads to a Sting Triple H match. So, which I don't have any problem doing because we can know Triple H can help Sting out a little bit there. So,
yep.
You know,
I could definitely, like you guys said, see it going on. But I just hope they don't just run it to the ground so much that we're just like, oh, please. I hope they know when to cut it off when it needs to be cut off.
As long as they keep making guys off of it, I don't care.
Mm.
I don't want to see you know, after you get Batista, Bryan, we've seen Orton, Bryan a million times. Not that we can't see it again, but... And then, you know, we've seen Triple H, Bryan, which they're saying we might see again, or we might see an 8-man tag, who knows, but... At some point, you've got to either put new people into it on the Triple H side, or you got to end it, because at some point, it's just going to get repetitive.
You know, I mean, Bryan beats the Authority, and then you have Brock waiting in the wings. I think that's the way they're going to go.
Yeah, you could do that. You could see, yeah, if you could have the Authority make a deal with Paul Heyman and they all embrace each other or something. I don't know. It just whatever. There's a long way to go for that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna laugh if we're still talking about this at WrestleMania 31.
Wouldn't that be something?
They kept the storyline up for a year. No way.
So don't worry, everyone. You can listen to WrestleMania 30 talk and get here, and we're same thing. We're just, you didn't miss a beat.
You know what? If it's still good, I might not give a shit. So
yeah, really, honestly, and I think we're all okay with that.
One more thing. Eric Young won the TNA World Title. Is he just a blatant copy of Bryan now? That's what everybody keeps saying.
It certainly feels like it, but the stories are completely different. I think I'm not as okay with Young getting it felt. I'm glad Magnus's title reign is over. Don't get me wrong, that was a blessing. Hot-shotting it to Eric Young, I think
felt like Chris Sabin again.
Yes, it's. I don't know if it's gonna be a mistake because the crowd, at least the Impact crowd, is so easily gets behind him, and generally people do wherever he goes. So I think it'll work. I just don't imagine this being a long-term answer.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I feel about it as well. I mean, I think Young is a fan favorite, and I think people, look at him as a underdog, kind of like Daniel Bryan. But on the other hand, I think it's just something where they're using him temporarily. That way they can kind of regain their footing, figure out where they're going to go. And, that's okay. He's a guy that, I think a lot of fans will be, having fun watching. It's not like they gave it to Willow.
Oh, thank God.
That would have been an interesting side, too.
We'd have to go back into the woods and search for him, and then Hillbilly Jim would have bumped into us. Where are we going?
He loses the world title in the cabin all the time.
Oh, my God. I can't even do Willow's voice.
Imagine what kind of crazy-ass belt he would make for Willow having it.
Oh, God. I forgot about the Hardy title.
I know.
It'll just have a big old Willow mask on it.
I just imagine this insanely terrible-looking checkerboard or chessboard belt, and I cringe.
Y'all thought the spinner title was terrible. Look at this.
You know what? I think we just need to get some funds together and buy David that belt. I think he'd like that.
God.
Or we'll writer it.
Yeah. Oh no, okay. I got a better idea. We give it to Zach, and then we sing "Breakfast at Tiffany's" as we give it to him.
It's terrible. You're gonna keep doing this gimmick here.
Well, somebody will enjoy the belt. Somebody.
Yep.
So, yeah, and definitely cool for Eric Young. I think we'll talk more about that on Monday. We'll get delve more into TNA talk, and of course we'll.
Speaking of Monday.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Monday night, midnight Eastern, our normal Wrestling to the Max episode. Yeah, we're going back to only doing one episode a week, thank God. It's getting a little, cumbersome doing this. For me, I do at least 3 or 4 podcasts a week, so it's like doing an extra one of these. It's like, God. This one was nice because it wasn't something like we just got to keep the schedule and try to get through everything, So far, we got, something cool happening on TNA. We've got NXT still. whatever's going on Raw. And
The Ultimate Warrior, old Raw.
yeah, there's going to be a lot of tributes to Ultimate Warrior, so expect that. If by then you're tired of it, you got to deal with it one more time. I don't know what's going to be going on since then. I guess we'll see if more stuff comes about Sting signing, and we'll see maybe if we get to see what they do with Shawn Merriman, and more things will happen by then, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see what's going to happen with Paige and all that.
Definitely.
I wonder how long do you think they're going to let her keep the NXT title for a while, or she's going to drop it next time they have taping?
They've made a big deal about her being both, so she might carry it for a little bit before I'm losing it to Charlotte, I would assume.
Yeah, it makes me wonder the same thing, but I really feel like the NXT title needs, or excuse me, the what do they call it? The
women's title.
NXT women's title.
Okay, I can't remember the exact title. I just call it the women's NXT title. Anyway, long story short, I think they will have to move it on. I mean, yeah, it may be kind of cool for her to hold both, but I still think, give some other people a chance. I think that's a good idea.
God, speaking of moving it on, can somebody move on the tag team NXT titles? Because they're just not doing nothing.
They had another team to work with. You'd probably be. Yeah.
Yeah.
They keep talking about moving the Ascension up. I'm like, so who's going to take the tag titles? The ghosts of no one? I mean, there's literally no one.
Well, when's Enzo going to be healthy? I think that's the big question.
Yeah, I guess they have to wait till then, right? Mm-hmm. Till Enzo's healthy, and then him and Big Cass.
I hope they get special belts that just say soft on them.
Me too.
That'd be great.
I still want that shirt. I want that shirt. Soft.
Why can't they just have Sandow and Aiden English tag team or something?
I don't know.
And Sandow actually gets his gimmick back.
Yeah.
God, poor Sandow. Who the hell did he piss off?
I know. It's still. I really get depressed about that. And I look at where Brodus Clay is now, and I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry. But
Brodus Clay could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Neville will have some great matches, I think.
Yeah, that's gonna be.
It's gonna be very interesting
because Brodus can actually work. It's not like just some big guy that can't move around.
Yeah. Like second coming of Bam Bam Bigelow almost. Except with Taz.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
As long as he doesn't make the same mistake Bam Bam Bigelow did for me.
Oh, really?
Yes. I will tell it. Paul has not heard this. You know what, Paul? Do you know this? Why I got out of watching WCW?
You're going to blame Bam Bam for that? Don't blame Bam Bam for that.
Bam Bam said one word that made me exit WCW forever. He called somebody else a turkey. And I thought a man that size, with that strength, and how cool he was, should never call somebody a turkey. He should just go beat him up. So I turned it off and turned it back to WBF. Raw was live.
God,
I never watched WCW ever again.
My dad used to call me a turkey all the time. I don't get what the whole thing
okay,
is.
I had been different if he called him a jive turkey, but he just said turkey. There's a difference.
So he's supposed to be Dusty Rhodes now? He's supposed to...
You can't put that on Bam Bam. I mean,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I did. That happened. Tell me that didn't happen. That happened.
Now I feel like we're just playing a blooper reel.
I know. Well, before we get too much into Robert Cooper land, big shout out to him.
We love you, Coop.
Yeah, Coop's amazing. But anyway, I think we're gonna have an awesome show next week. I cannot wait. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Thank you to everybody who stuck with us the entire extra. This has been a blast doing it. Like Sean said, we don't particularly like doing a whole lot of these because we want them to be special, but this is special. This is something that had it popped up, and we wanted to give our own tribute to the Ultimate Warrior, and I really feel like we did. I think we did a good job of it. He was a great man, and best wishes and prayers to his family. I mean, this trying time, we only want the best for them. So, well, guys, if there's nothing else, I think it's time to go ahead and head on down the road. So, if you're not living life to the max,
Not living life at all.
You know,
Dadgummit, I was trying to find the song before we ended. That didn't work out too well. No, I don't have it on here, so you have to just do it the old way.
That's all right.
Later, everyone.